glass boardroom on the 40th floor was completely silent. Rain was tapping against the heavy windows, looking out over the city skyline. At the head of the dark mahogany table sat a $50 million modernization contract. On my left sat Derek Cole, our 32-year-old vice president of enterprise growth. He was leaning back in his leather chair, adjusting his silver cufflinks, looking completely relaxed in his tailored blue suit. Across from us sat Victor Ross, the chief decision-maker for one of the largest global manufacturing groups in the world. Victor was a man in his late 50s, with cold gray eyes and a thick black leather folder open in front of him. We were 30 minutes into the pitch. Derek had been talking continuously, filling the room with slick sales phrases and big promises about how easily our software could update Victor's massive factory network. But Derek did not know the software. He had never written a line of code in his life. As he pointed to a slide showing a 3-month integration timeline, I saw the flaw immediately. The roadmap was an operational disaster. If we pushed the update on that schedule, the real-time data sync would crash the legacy databases in every single plant within 90 days. I cleared my throat softly. I picked up my pen, looked directly across at Victor, and spoke in a calm, steady voice. Before we sign off on that schedule, we need to address the real-time sync protocol. The legacy hardware running your European plants cannot process that data load without a custom translation layer. If we force it, the whole system will lock up. I did not raise my voice. I did not use complicated jargon. I simply stated the factual engineering truth. Before Victor could even answer, Derek's face turned bright red. He let out a loud, condescending laugh that cut straight through the quiet room. He leaned forward, rested his elbows on the table, and shook his head like he was listening to a foolish child. "James, please," Derek said, his voice dripping with arrogance. He turned to Victor and waved his hand dismissively in my direction. "I apologize for the distraction, Victor. James here is just one of our legacy technicians. He's been hiding in the server rooms for 20 years. He built our baseline code back in the day, but he is severely unqualified to speak at this level of strategic deal-making. Let's leave the complex business strategy to the people who actually run the enterprise." Derek smiled, completely satisfied with himself. He thought he had just put me in my place. He expected me to drop my eyes, stare at my lap, and be quiet like I had done for the last 6 months. Instead, the room went completely dead. Victor Ross stopped writing. He slowly laid his silver pen down on the mahogany table. He looked at Derek for 5 long seconds. Then, without saying a word, Victor reached down, closed his thick leather folder, and pulled his coat over his shoulders. Victor stood up slowly. He was 6'2", and his presence filled the entire glass room. "Derek," Victor said, his voice quiet, flat, and colder than the rain outside. "If the man who personally built the core architecture of your system is considered unqualified to tell me how it works, then Kensington Industrial Systems is fundamentally incompetent." Victor turned his eyes toward me. The coldness in his face vanished, replaced by deep respect. "James," Victor said softly, "grab your coat. Let's go down the street and get a real cup of coffee. My name is James Callahan. I am 48 years old, and for 22 straight years, my life belonged to Kensington Industrial Systems. I built the foundation of that company with my own 2 hands. Back when Kensington was just a small regional vendor operating out of a cramped brick warehouse, I sat in cold rooms with concrete floors, drinking stale coffee, and writing the underlying framework for what would eventually become CoreGrid. CoreGrid became the master operational engine of the firm. It was the digital central nervous system that managed supply chains, factory automation, and enterprise data for over 200 industrial clients across the country. Every line of original source code carried my signature. For over 2 decades, I gave that company everything I had. I missed birthdays, stayed awake through 72-hour server outages, and personally pulled Kensington back from the edge of operational collapse more times than I could count. I never complained. I was never a loud man. I was a practical, quiet engineer who believed in simple rules. Do good work, tell the truth, protect the systems, and loyalty will be rewarded. I needed that reward because my life outside those glass offices was built on very real financial stakes. My 19-year-old daughter, Clara, was in her 2nd year of engineering school, and I was paying her tuition out of pocket so she wouldn't start her adult life trapped in debt. On top of that, my wife, Ellen, had undergone a massive spinal surgery 2 years prior, following a severe car accident. Her ongoing rehabilitation and nerve therapy bills were staggering, costing thousands of dollars every single month. I couldn't afford to play political games. I had a family depending on my paycheck. Then came Derek Cole. 6 months ago, our executive board hired Derek as the new vice president of enterprise growth. Derek was 32, wore $4,000 suits, spoke in slick corporate buzzwords, and held an MBA from an elite university. He didn't care about software stability or engineering truth. He cared about 3 things: short-term profit margins, quick commission checks, and making himself look like a genius to the board of directors. The moment Derek arrived, he looked at my salary and saw an outdated expense. He didn't understand that software needs constant care from the people who built it. He saw my 22 years of experience as a threat to his authority. Over 6 agonizing months, Derek systematically stripped away everything I had earned. First, he canceled my annual performance bonus, claiming the technical department had missed its arbitrary efficiency targets. Next, he disbanded my core engineering team, reassigning my best senior developers to cheap offshore vendors to cut payroll costs. Then, he took my name off 3 enterprise patents I had personally authored, placing his own name at the top of the filings. The final insult came 2 months before the Victor Ross meeting. Derek officially moved my office out of the executive suite. He forced me to pack my boxes and sent me down to a windowless basement room sitting directly next to the roaring server racks. I took every hit. I swallowed my pride, walked down into that cold basement every morning, and kept my head down. I did it for Ellen's medical bills, for Clara's college tuition, and because I naively believed that real work eventually speaks for itself. But Derek made one critical mistake. In his arrogance, he assumed that because I was quiet, I was weak, and because I was sitting in the basement, I was useless. What Derek failed to realize was that CoreGrid did not run on his glossy pitch decks. It ran on complex, custom-built integration layers that I had written by hand over 20 years. I knew every flaw, every legacy bypass, and every hidden security bridge in that code. I understood the source code down to its bare DNA. Without me, Kensington didn't own a software empire. They owned a ticking time bomb. And Derek had just pushed the man holding the detonator right out the front door. Kensington's financial situation was far worse than the public knew. Revenue had been falling for 3 straight quarters, and the executive board was in a state of quiet panic. Landing Victor Ross's manufacturing conglomerate was the only thing standing between Kensington and massive, company-wide layoffs. Derek Cole had promised the board that he would close the $50 million deal single-handedly, using his flashy sales pitch and polished corporate strategy. But 3 days before the final presentation, Victor's chief technical officer sent an urgent demand. They wanted hard, verifiable proof that CoreGrid could process massive industrial data streams across 40 global factories simultaneously, without crashing. Derek did not know the first thing about server loads, database threads, or data flow. He was completely out of his depth and backed into a tight corner. On Tuesday morning, Derek summoned me up from my windowless basement room into his corner office. He did not ask how I was doing. He did not ask about my family. He did not apologize for stripping my performance bonuses or moving my desk near the server racks. He simply slid a printout of his pitch deck across his heavy oak desk. "I need you in the boardroom on Thursday, James," Derek said, casually checking his gold watch. "Victor's technical team is asking annoying, detailed questions. I need a warm body with a senior engineering title sitting at the table so they see we have technical depth. But let me be completely clear about your role." He leaned over his desk and glared at me with cold, arrogant eyes. "You sit there, you wear a clean suit, and you nod when I talk. You do not open your mouth. You do not offer unsolicited opinions. You are there as visual decoration to make me look good." I picked up the pitch deck and flipped through the slides. As I read his proposed roadmap, my blood ran cold. Derek was promising Victor a full system deployment in just 90 days across every single factory. It was a complete lie and an operational impossibility. CoreGrid's legacy database structures required at least 18 months of slow, careful integration to run safely. Pushing it through in 90 days would overheat the regional servers, corrupt factory data logs, and shut down Victor's manufacturing lines across 3 continents. I looked Derek straight in the eyes. "Derek, this timeline is completely impossible," I said, in a calm, steady voice. "If you promise them 90 days, the system will crash within 3 months of going live. It will cost them tens of millions of dollars in lost production, and it will destroy our company's reputation forever." Derek's face twisted into venomous rage. He slammed his fist onto his oak desk, rattling his coffee mug. "Listen to me, you washed-up old technician," he snarled. "I run this department, not you. You don't tell me what is possible. You do what you are told. If you say a single word in that room that jeopardizes my deal, I will fire you on the spot for gross insubordination. I will strip your health insurance, fight your severance in court, and make sure you never work in this industry again." That was the exact moment something broken inside me finally reconnected. For 22 years, I had bent over backward to protect Kensington and save executives from their own mistakes. But sitting in that lavish office, looking at that arrogant young man threatening my family's survival and my wife's medical care, I realized the hard truth. Loyalty to people who treat you as disposable is not a virtue. It is foolishness. I looked at Derek, nodded slowly, and walked out of his office. I decided right then that I was done protecting Derek Cole from reality. Thursday morning arrived, bringing us directly into that glass boardroom on the 40th floor. Rain was streaking down the windows. The air inside the room was thick with tension. Derek was pacing back and forth in front of the large display screen, throwing around every hollow corporate buzzword he knew: synergy, automated scaling, dynamic cloud optimization, and zero downtime execution. He was painting a grand fantasy world where a 90-day rollout was simple and effortless. Across the table, Victor Ross sat motionless. His cold gray eyes followed Derek's waving hands without a single flicker of emotion. Finally, Victor raised his right hand, cutting Derek off in the middle of a sentence. "Mr. Cole," Victor said, his voice deep and stern, Stop the sales pitch. I want to talk about raw, operational reality. How exactly does your platform handle legacy server migration when communicating across our older overseas plants? And what specific data security protocols protect our real-time manufacturing streams during the transition? Derek froze. A light bead of sweat broke out along his hairline. He turned toward the screen, stammered through a couple of meaningless phrases about cloud encryption and dynamic bandwidth, and tried to laugh it off. He was completely out of his depth, spouting generic answers that made zero technical sense. I looked across at Victor. I saw a serious businessman who ran factories, employing thousands of working people, about to be sold a dangerous lie that could ruin his company. I knew Derek had threatened my job, my health insurance, and my livelihood. But I was an engineer first, and I refused to let a scam artist ruin real working infrastructure. The current system cannot handle direct cloud migration over those legacy plant networks, I said, speaking up cleanly and clearly. If you try it using Derek's roadmap, the memory overhead will overflow the local cache, freeze the factory controllers, and corrupt your transaction logs within 72 hours. The room fell into dead silence. Derek's face flushed dark red. I continued calmly, explaining the exact technical truth in plain English. What you actually need is a custom hybrid translation layer. It sits between your old plant hardware and our core database. It safely queues the data during peak factory shifts, encrypts it locally, and syncs it during low-volume hours. It takes 12 months to build safely, but it guarantees zero downtime. Derek was shaking with pure rage. His authority had been completely shattered in front of a $50 million buyer. That was when he lost his composure entirely and yelled the insult that ended his career. "James, shut your mouth. You are an overpaid, unqualified legacy worker who sits in a basement. You don't belong at this decision-making table." Derek expected Victor to join in and reprimand me. Instead, Victor slowly laid his silver pen down, closed his leather folder, and looked at Derek like he was looking at a stain on the rug. 10 years ago, Victor said quietly, his voice echoing in the silent room, I was the chief operating officer at Apex Global. Our entire enterprise system suffered a catastrophic core crash at midnight on a Friday. We were losing $500,000 every hour. The assembly lines were dark. Our own executives panicked. Do you know who showed up at our data center at 2 in the morning? Victor pointed his finger directly across the table at me. This man right here, James Callahan. He didn't ask about his title. He didn't ask about his executive status. He took off his jacket, sat in our freezing server room for 36 straight hours without sleep, wrote custom hot patches directly into our source code, and saved our entire enterprise from bankruptcy. Victor stood up slowly, his tall frame dominating the room. I never forgot his face, and I never forgot his name. James Callahan is the reason my previous company survived, and you just called him unqualified. Victor turned to me, his voice softening. James, grab your coat. This company doesn't deserve your talent, and they certainly won't get my money. Let's go down the street and get that coffee. I did not say a single word to Derek. I slowly stood up. I reached into my coat pocket, unclipped my Kensington employee access badge, and laid it gently in the exact center of the mahogany table. I picked up my leather notebook, zipped up my jacket, and walked out of the glass boardroom side by side with the $50 million buyer, leaving Derek Cole standing alone in total ruin. We walked out of the heavy glass doors of Kensington's corporate headquarters and stepped into the cool rain. The noise of city traffic surrounded us, but my mind was completely still. For the first time in 22 years, I did not have a company badge clipped to my belt. I did not have an employee ID number. I was a free man, standing on a wet city sidewalk, holding a worn leather notebook. Victor led me across the street to a small, quiet diner with red vinyl booths and steam fogging up the front windows. We sat down near the back, and the waitress poured us 2 cups of black coffee without asking. Victor took a slow sip, set his cup down, and looked across the table at me. "James, I'm going to tell you something honest," he said. I never believed a single word coming out of Derek Cole's mouth. Guys like him are everywhere in modern corporate business. They wear $4,000 suits, memorize shiny buzzwords, and promise the moon because they don't have to build the rocket. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. The only reason I walked into that building today was because my research team told me that James Callahan was still listed as Chief Systems Architect. I remembered what you did for Apex Global 10 years ago. I knew that if James Callahan was building the infrastructure, my factories would be safe. But watching that young boy disrespect you in front of everyone told me everything I needed to know about where Kensington is headed. Victor pulled a clean fountain pen from his coat pocket and tapped it against his coffee cup. "My manufacturing group has a $50 million modernization budget," Victor continued, his voice calm and firm. "We are not giving a single dime of that money to Kensington Industrial Systems. We are giving it to you." I looked at him, stunned. "Victor, I just resigned. I don't have a corporate structure behind me anymore." "Then build one," Victor replied instantly. "Form your own independent enterprise consulting firm tomorrow morning. My legal team will draft a master service agreement by the end of the week. We will issue an initial advance payment of $5 million directly to your new company. You will hire your own engineering team, set your own terms, and oversee the entire global integration yourself. You will have total operational authority." Sitting in that quiet diner booth, listening to the rain outside, I felt a heavy weight lift off my shoulders. Clara's tuition, Ellen's medical therapy, 22 years of quiet sacrifice, it all crystallized into this single moment of absolute justification. "I accept," I said, shaking his hand firmly across the table. While Victor and I were finalizing our agreement over coffee, absolute chaos was exploding back on the 40th floor of Kensington headquarters. Derek Cole had sprinted straight to the CEO's corner office, desperate to protect his reputation. He fabricated a ridiculous story, claiming that I had suffered an emotional breakdown in the boardroom, hurled insults at the client, and intentionally sabotaged the pitch because I was bitter about my office relocation. Derek told the executive team that he had gallantly tried to save the meeting, but my unprofessional behavior had spooked Victor Ross. For about 2 hours, the executive team believed Derek's lie. They were preparing termination papers for gross misconduct to make sure I received no severance or pension benefits. Then, at precisely 2 o'clock that afternoon, an email arrived in the CEO's inbox. It came directly from Victor Ross's personal account, and it was CC'd to every member of Kensington's board of directors. The message was brief, brutal, and crystal clear. Victor stated that Kensington Industrial Systems had been officially removed from consideration for the $50 million contract. He explicitly named Derek Cole, citing his appalling disrespect toward Chief Systems Architect James Callahan as proof of company-wide incompetence. Victor added that his organization would never do business with Kensington again as long as Derek Cole remained in management. Derek's cover story collapsed in a matter of seconds. The board realized that their vice president of enterprise growth hadn't just lost a pitch. He had personally destroyed the biggest contract in the company's history. Within 48 hours of my departure, reality caught up with Kensington Industrial Systems. When Derek Cole had restructured the technical department months earlier, He had fired my senior engineering staff to cut costs, replacing them with cheap offshore contractors and fresh college graduates who only knew basic surface-level maintenance. Derek assumed that software was like a piece of office furniture. Once installed, it just sat there working forever without human attention. On Saturday morning, a routine power fluctuation triggered a minor database glitch at Kensington's main regional server hub in Chicago. Under normal circumstances, my old team or I would have cleared the error in 10 minutes using a simple override command. Instead, CoreGrid went into automatic security lockdown. The legacy code, which I had specifically designed to protect client data during network anomalies, froze all incoming transaction channels. Over 50 major industrial clients, automotive plants, shipping hubs, and steel mills, found themselves locked out of their operational control systems. Shipping trucks sat idling at warehouse gates. Factory assembly lines ground to a complete halt, and thousands of real-time inventory records were frozen in place. The junior engineers panicked. They spent hours sifting through millions of lines of source code, trying to figure out how to manually bypass the security lock. But they didn't have my master documentation. In his rush to move my office down to the basement, Derek had ordered my old paper manuals archived and locked away, believing they were useless historical clutter. By Monday morning, Kensington's corporate headquarters was in absolute, unadulterated chaos. Clients were calling every minute, threatening massive breach of contract lawsuits for millions in lost production time. Standing in the middle of a screaming bullpen of frantic executives, Derek Cole finally swallowed his pride and pulled out his cell phone. I was sitting in my brand new corner office across town, drinking fresh coffee and reviewing the incorporation papers for my new firm, Callahan Enterprise Solutions. Victor Ross's legal team was sitting across the table, finalizing my $5 million advance payment. My personal phone began to ring. The caller ID displayed Derek Cole's mobile number. I let it ring 4 times before placing it on speaker. "James!" Derek yelled, his voice tight, cracking with desperate panic. "Where are you? We have a critical system lockdown across the Chicago regional network. The junior techs can't bypass the core validation script. I need you to get down to the server room right now and fix this." He didn't offer an apology. He didn't acknowledge what had happened in the boardroom. He spoke as if I were still his underpaid subordinate sitting near the server racks. I took a slow sip of coffee and spoke in a cold, measured tone. "Derek, I no longer work for Kensington Industrial Systems. I handed you my badge on Thursday." "Look, James, don't be difficult," Derek snapped, trying to sound authoritative despite the ambient noise of shouting executives in his background. "I will sign off on an emergency hourly contractor rate for you. I'll pay you $100 an hour to clear the lock. Just log into the portal and fix it." I smiled quietly, looking out the floor-to-ceiling window of my new suite. My independent emergency consulting fee is $1,500 an hour, with a minimum guaranteed retainer of 40 hours paid up front, I said clearly. In addition, before I even look at a single line of code, I require a formal, written statement signed by you and the CEO, officially retracting your statement in the boardroom and acknowledging my qualifications in writing. $1,500 an hour? Derek choked, his voice reaching a high-pitched squeak. "That's insane. That's extortion. I will never sign a document admitting I was wrong to a technician." "Then I suggest you figure out how to debug CoreGrid yourself, Derek," I said softly. "Have a good morning." I hung up the phone. Over the next 24 hours, Kensington's operational system stayed completely frozen. News of the outage leaked to the financial press. Kensington's stock price crashed by 24% in a single day of trading, wiping out tens of millions in market value. The company was bleeding credibility and facing total bankruptcy. Seeing their fortunes dissolve, the board of directors stripped Derek Cole of his operational authority and stepped in directly to save the enterprise. On Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang again. This time, it was not Derek Cole. It was Arthur Vance, the chief executive officer and chairman of the board at Kensington Industrial Systems. His voice was trembling. The arrogance was completely gone. He did not make threats. He did not offer low hourly contractor rates. He openly begged me to come to an emergency board meeting at 5 o'clock that evening to save the company from complete bankruptcy. At 4:55, I stepped out of the high-speed elevator onto the 40th floor. But I did not walk in alone as a lonely basement technician. I walked in as the chief executive officer of Callahan Enterprise Solutions. Standing at my side was Victor Ross, along with 3 senior corporate attorneys carrying thick black leather briefcases. We pushed open the heavy doors of that same glass boardroom where I had been insulted 5 days earlier. The entire board of directors was sitting around the mahogany table, looking exhausted, pale, and defeated. Sitting in the corner, away from the rest of the leadership team, was Derek Cole. His tailored suit was wrinkled, his hair was messy, and his hands were visibly shaking. I walked directly to the head of the table, pulled out a chair, and sat down. Victor Ross sat to my right, and my legal team sat to my left. CEO Arthur Vance stood up, looking at me with deep desperation. "James, thank you for coming," he said quietly. "Our regional servers are still locked. Our enterprise clients are canceling their accounts every hour. We need you to unlock Core Grid right now." I did not raise my voice. I took a secure black flash drive out of my jacket pocket and slid it across the polished wood table to the board secretary. "Before we discuss fixing your servers," I said in a calm, clear voice, "you need to look at that drive. It contains a complete digital audit of your enterprise operations over the past 6 months." The secretary plugged the drive into the main system, and high-resolution audit reports appeared on the large glass display screens. In plain, undeniable detail, my audit exposed everything Derek Cole had been hiding. It showed that Derek had falsified system stability reports to the board, hidden critical legacy database vulnerabilities, and lied about our delivery schedules. Most importantly, it included a certified transcript of the $50 million presentation, proving beyond doubt that Derek had insulted the chief architect and caused Victor Ross to walk out. The room went dead silent. The board members turned their heads and glared at Derek with pure hatred. Derek panicked. He jumped out of his chair, knocking his leather notepad to the floor. "That's a lie," he shouted, pointing a trembling finger at me. "He fabricated those logs. James sabotaged the servers himself. He's trying to ruin me." Arthur Vance slammed his palm onto the table so hard the glass windows vibrated. "Shut up, Derek," Vance roared. Vance turned to the corporate security officer standing near the door. "Escort Mr. Cole out of this building immediately. Strip his security clearance, clear his desk into a cardboard box, and hand his files over to our legal team. His unvested stock options are revoked, and his employment is terminated for gross negligence, effective this second." 2 burly security guards grabbed Derek by the arms. Derek tried to struggle, screaming excuses as he was dragged backward out of the glass boardroom, his dress shoes squeaking loudly against the marble floor. Every employee in the outer office watched in dead silence as the former vice president was marched out of the building in total disgrace. Once the door closed, Arthur Vance looked across at me, completely defeated. "What are your terms, James?" My legal team slid a master subcontracting agreement across the table. Kensington was forced to sign an exclusive contract paying Callahan Enterprise Solutions $4 million annually just to maintain and secure core grid. I was no longer an employee. I was their most expensive and powerful vendor. 6 months have passed since that rainy afternoon in the glass boardroom. I am sitting in my new corner office on the 45th floor of a modern glass tower across the avenue. The sun is shining brightly through the windows, casting a warm light across my wide wooden desk. Outside, the city skyline stretches out toward the horizon, bustling with life and motion. Callahan Enterprise Solutions is thriving beyond anything I had ever imagined. We currently manage the core industrial operations for Victor Ross's global manufacturing group, executing a smooth, multi-year integration that has already increased their factory efficiency without a single second of unexpected downtime. My company is built on a very different set of values than Kensington. I did not hire fast-talking salespeople or executives who only know slick buzzwords. I filled my engineering suites with talented, overlooked veteran developers, men and women in their late 40s and 50s who had been pushed aside by corporate ageism and short-sighted management. They are paid top industry salaries, treated with deep respect, and given full creative freedom to build software that lasts. My family's financial security is completely permanent. My daughter, Clara, finished her semester at the top of her engineering class, completely free of student debt and working on advanced robotic control systems. My wife, Ellen, completed her final round of specialized spinal rehabilitation last month. Yesterday afternoon, for the first time in 3 long years, she walked through our front garden without needing her cane or experiencing pain. Looking at her smiling face as we sat on our front porch was worth every single battle I fought. As for Kensington Industrial Systems, they survived the crisis, but they are a shell of their former self. They pay my firm millions every year just to keep their baseline servers running smoothly. Word of Derek Cole's public firing and gross negligence spread like wildfire through the entire corporate technology sector. In an industry built on trust and data security, no major firm would ever put an executive who falsified operational audits anywhere near their leadership team. The last thing I heard about Derek was that he had been forced to move out of his luxury high-rise apartment, unable to land even an entry-level sales job in the city. Looking back on everything that happened, I don't feel anger and I don't feel bitterness. I feel a quiet, settled peace. Corporate titles, glossy pitch decks, and tailored suits can fool people in calm waters for a little while. Arrogant executives like Derek Cole often believe that loud authority and political maneuvering make them invincible. But when the storm hits, slick words cannot process data, fix broken code, or keep factory assembly lines moving. Real competence doesn't need to shout, pull rank, or humiliate others to prove its worth. Real competence simply builds things that endure. And when short-sighted leaders push out the quiet people who do the actual work, reality eventually comes knocking at the door, demanding a price that no amount of corporate arrogance can ever pay.